بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Again, I am a sister who is doing this recording, and for modesty purposes I have deepened my voice. So inshallah, as I was mentioned, for us to keep that in mind. I did another session, another little talk, you could say, about how to go about or undertake the journey of seeking knowledge. And in that one, I talked very much about the baltini, the internal aspects of studying ilm, etc., etc., and why we study the sacred sciences, what our intention is, and how our behavior should be upon studying, etc., etc., etc. And I briefly touched upon a few external things quite quickly. That I mentioned very quickly towards the end about some practical things that are to be done during madrasa life. But I didn't go into detail because I always consider the spiritual aspect to be more important than the actual practical side of it. Although the practical side is very important as well. So, inshallah ta'ala, from the brief experience that I've had, alhamdulillah, there have been certain things throughout this journey that I have learned help a lot in a student's life. And when I mean study, I mean the study of the sacred sciences, which usually follows a set curriculum, a set syllabus, and that is that initially, like our teachers explained to us, you have the ulumul aliyah with a hamza, which means the sciences that are the tools in order to understand the ulum al-aliyah, yani the sciences which are the high sciences, the esteemed sciences, like the sciences of hadith and the sciences of fiqh, etc., etc. So before all of that, there are certain sciences that need to be learned in order to understand those more advanced subjects, and that really, in a nutshell, is learning Arabic inside out. And after that, usually we are given with a small little samples of the bigger texts to come. So if you study a traditional Dars Nizami syllabus, you'll find that there is progression from one book to the other. So there's progression from one book to the other in terms of the depth of the subject and the difficulty, and it's usually dependent upon the difficulty of the ibara, the actual text of the book that you are reading for the particular subject. So, for example, in fiqh, classical way up is to do Nurul Idah, and then study Mukhtasar al-Quduri, then do Hidayah. That's like a classical progression that you'll find that students undertake these days. Students also do Fiqh al-Muyassar in the beginning. And in a hadith, for example, there's one of the classical progressions is Zad al-Talibin, which is like a staple for any basic beginning student. Zad al-Talibin, which is a very small collection of books, a very small collection of hadith, going upwards to Riyadh al-Salihin, perhaps, and maybe other books upon that level. And then slowly the student is progressed onto Mishkat al-Masabih, and then finally the student reaches the Sahih Sitta, which are the Sahih Sitta, which in Imam Bukhari, Muslim, etc., their collections, which are studied, and they call it the Dawra Hadith, which is basically you could say like the cream of the whole syllabus, right? So this progression like that in a classical syllabus, and I was mentioning before that in the beginning there are the sciences which, in order to study these books, Hidayah, to study Bukhari, Mishkat, anything, what is necessary is the knowledge of Arabic and everything that is inside it. So in Arabic, usually the students undertake 3 subjects at least. One subject isn't as necessary, but it's still in Dars al-Nizami syllabus, and in order for full understanding of the Quran and the Sunnah, it is very needy to complete that understanding. But the 3 main subjects are Nahu, Sarf, and Adab. So this is what we were taught in the first year when we started. We were doing Nahu, Sarf, and Adab. And the 4th one is Balagha. And there may be other sciences, like poetry and things like that within Arabic as well, but they're not so important in the Dars al-Nizami syllabus and for a student of sacred knowledge. So Nahu, Sarf, and Adab. Adab isn't very important, but there again, it's beneficial, very beneficial, because what it does is it allows you to put your Nahu and Sarf into practice, and Adab is basically literature. So again, for Nahu and Sarf, there needs to be progression. So first of all, when we studied, we had no books in Sarf, no books in Nahu. And if we did in Nahu, we sometimes followed Tasheel al-Nahu in the very beginning, and then in Sarf we had no textbook straight away. And I'll explain some of these things, inshallah ta'ala. And afterwards, from Nahu you progress, and it depends on how full of a curriculum you're doing. I think, traditionally students progress from Tafsir al-Nahu or other books like that, which are very, sometimes they're in English or Urdu, another language. Doesn't have to be Arabic. Very simple manuals on Arabic grammar and then maybe a student will progress on to study, for example, Hidayah, Nahu, Hidayatul Nahu, and then Nahu, and then into other books. If again you're doing a more comprehensive, more fulfilling curriculum, then yes, more higher. There are higher books in Nahu, Sharh ibn Aqil, Al-Kifaya, books like that. So that's that. And the first part of studying is to actually get all of the tools necessary in order to study hadith, in order to study fiqh. And this takes a few years in of itself. It takes about 3 years on average, 3-4 years on average to get that foundation fixed, and then you move on, and you study. You start to study the higher books, and you start to do what you were intending to do, which is study books of hadith and study books of fiqh and study other things. And that's the whole purpose, right? That we've come to madrasa. That's the whole point of us studying, and the whole point of us learning our fa'ala, fa'lu, was so that one day we could, subhanallah, read قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. And if you know sarf, you know what that is all about. So some advice on how to actually practically study. This is just things that I've kind of drawn from experience, and I thought I'd share them, inshallah ta'ala. But one thing to understand is that any advice anyone gives is always very relative to that person's experience. This is very important to experiment, get advice from people. If you're struggling, get advice from fellow students, and try and experiment with their advice as much as you can. And whichever advice you find how fits you best and you can do amal on it, do it. Right? I've talked a lot before about the batini aspects, the internal aspects, but it's very important for me to reiterate that as a student we need himmah, we need courage, we need sabr, and we need dedication, right? When we miss one lesson, right, shaitan really plays with our minds, and he says, that's it, you can't come back to class, and it's a disaster. It's very important to have that dedication in the heart, right? So when you start studying, you start with Arabic. That's how it's meant to be. Sometimes, if you study, you may do a pre-year before that, which is, maybe just studying fiqh from English manuals and things like that, but not really doing anything deep. Fine. But in most curriculums, you're studying Nahu, you're studying Sarf. So what do you do in order to, inshallah ta'ala, maximize your time studying, especially in these first few crucial years? These are the crucial years for the rest of your life, right? And if these years are not corrected, and they are not done properly, then sadly, it'll be very hard to be sitting in a Bukhari class one day if the first years are not done properly. Let's just say it like that. So the first thing is that when we come into our lessons, we must come with an attitude that I'm going to study for the long term, not the short term. I'm not just going to study so that I can make my teacher happy, that wow, I know how to do a qirdan, oh wow, I know what this particular lesson of Nahu entails. And this, subhanAllah, I've seen huge problem with our students. What we do is, we want things quick. We want quick term solution. And I used to see subhanAllah students back in the beginning few years, subhanAllah, running around asking for help, right? And really not doing things actively. Sadly, they're no longer with us. Subhanallah, may Allah forgive us. See, we have to have this mindset that when I'm studying for tomorrow. I want to use this ilm that Allah has given me. I want to be able to use it, not just be able to say to people that I've studied Bukhari or I've studied Mishkat. I don't want to say that to people. I want to be able to use this knowledge that Allah has given me. And for that, we have to dedicate ourselves. It's very important. And believe me, if the foundations are correct, and I say this to many students, if you work very hard in your first few years, believe me, Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawood, Tirmidhi, they're not going to be any harder. That's a secret. Right? It will actually be a little bit easier. Of course, the reason why there's difficulty is because the density of the topic is larger, because what I mean by that is that because there's more content, there's fresher fresh words to look at, fresh vocabulary. That's the difficult side of it. But other than that, there's nothing difficult. The difficult part is in the foundational years, let me tell you that. And that's no longer a secret. So, what do? Our intention must be, I want to be able to serve the deen of Allah. I want to be able to use this knowledge. And so when we're studying, we have to have that mindset of how am I going to use it tomorrow.